it doesn't abide by any standard of international law, international human rights, anything. Yet the UN bases its report on intel coming from this organization. Welcome to the Afghan Eye YouTube channel. If this is your first visit, make sure to subscribe and press the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our new videos.
Which leads to the next point. Number 2 of the 5 recommendations are to reinforce the conditionality of a final US troop withdrawal. And the report states, I quote, "A report issued by the United Nations in May 2020 observed that relations between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda remain close." So what the Afghanistan Study Group is saying here is that there should not be a fixed time limit on US troop withdrawal. The time should not be the basis on which troops are withdrawn, but the Taliban meeting certain conditions should be what the US bases its troop withdrawal on. Now, and those conditions, of course, are those that are stipulated by the Doha deal, such as a reduction in violence, such as cutting ties with Al-Qaeda and all of these terrorist groups. The problem with that, however, is that it implies that the failure to adhere to the Doha deal is only something that the Taliban are responsible of. And yeah, what do you say about that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because this argument is entirely based on a report published in May of 2020. Okay, so the report that they are referring to is a report issued by UN Sanctions monitoring team for Al-Qaeda and Daesh. It's a monitoring team that monitors all these sanctioned terrorist organizations, and the intel that is provided to that monitoring team in order for it to publish its reports comes from the member states. Now, who are these member states in this particular case? Afghanistan. And which institution in Afghanistan provides such intel? The National Directorate of Security. So, if
an institution in which Amrullah Saleh has a lot of influence.
The current head of NDS, I think his name is Zia Sarraj. He's a very close confidant of Amrullah Saleh. And this particular report was published in May of 2020. Okay? So the Doha deal was signed in February of 2020. In May, this report was issued. Okay? So now, almost a year later, the Afghanistan Study Group is making an argument that the Taliban are not abiding by the Doha deal. They have not they have broken their ties with Al-Qaeda. And in order to prove that, they are referring to a document from last year. Okay? So by May of 2020...
A document from last year which referenced the National Director of Security.
So by May of 2020, the Taliban were supposed to meet this requirement. But on the other hand, if you look at the Doha deal, it was a deal between the United States and the Taliban. Both sides had their obligations, their commitments, but did the United States fulfill all its commitments by due dates? No, because even the prisoners, the Taliban prisoners, weren't released. Yeah, they were.
5,000.
It was a major point in the deal.
They were supposed to be released on March. They were supposed to be released before March the 10th, at which time the negotiations were meant to formally start.
And
I remember that from the agreement.
yeah, so
that took months.
those prisoners weren't even released. The prisoners weren't released. So this report is basically arguing that only the Taliban had obligations. That this is very problematic. And now coming to NDS. See, the thing is that the United States and its allies, they have created the National Directorate for Security in Afghanistan. It is basically a reincarnation of Qaeda. Qaeda was the National Directorate of Security under the communist regime. And this institution is mentioned in various reports as a violator of human rights. It is accused of assassinating civilians all over the country. It is torturing people. So it doesn't abide by any standard of international law, international human rights, anything. Yet the UN bases its report on intel coming from this organization. And now the Afghanistan Study Group is on its turn relying on a report by the UN that relies on a organization like NDS that is involved in torturing people. Like even the other day, I read that NDS, when they imprison people, they threaten them and they say, we are going to rape your female family members. You know, this is the kind of organization that is the NDS. And this organization is providing the intel to the UN and subsequently to Afghanistan Study Group. So you can see clearly that we have a major issue with this report and its findings and its conclusions, because if you're going to write 88 pages and your most important critique on which you are going to basically argue that the Doha deal needs to be cancelled is based on the NDS, then yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm not convinced.
And you're also you're commissioned by the United States Congress, like, without using big words. Come on, man, do better. But in any case, there's also another issue that I have with this, and it's from the quote that I mentioned previously. Withdrawal is conditional on the Taliban's demonstrating willingness and capacity to contain terrorist groups. Okay? And then it says that relations are close. So the Taliban have essentially, according to the text of the agreement, agreed that they will not let Al-Qaeda fundraise, operate, train, basically, I'm not going to, but I've mentioned it earlier, right? Now, relations remain close, according to that report, which relied on the NDS. What does close mean? And at which stage are we like, okay, this is a desirable level of closeness? At which stage does it get too close? Where is the empirical sort of standard? What is the benchmark by which we judge the Taliban have overstepped their closeness to Al-Qaeda?
For instance,
you have to be very specific about that.
You could say there is a signal group chat of all terrorists, and you see a notification, Taliban have left the chat.
Yeah.
And then take a screenshot and give it to the Afghanistan Study Group. Like, look, they left the chat. They're no longer.